Yeah, I think so.
I know how Tammy is. Ready to call.
Call to order the Nuisance County Board of Supervisors, April 28, 2021, work session to order. Ms. Watkins, we call the roll, please.
Mr. Evelyn?
Here.
Mr. Tiller?
Here.
Ms. Page?
Here.
Mr. Steers?
Here.
And Mr. Lockwood?
Here.
All right, good morning, everyone. First item on the agenda is something that we've been really looking forward to hearing for a long time. You know, a lot of citizens are going to be tuned in, listening to it well, but I had a lot of calls about this. But, so first item on the agenda is Nuisance Fiber Optic Network Design and Plan Update from Work Street Networks.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm with Matt. I'll give presentations so y'all can hear me. My name is Robert Taylor. I'm a business development manager with River Street Networks. With me today is Lon Welchel. He's also business development manager as well as our boss, Greg Coltrane, the VP of business development for River Street Networks. So what I want to go over today is the broadband expansion plan that we've had prepared so far for you. We've got the fiber optic design done. We're still working on the wireless design. So I don't have that with me, but I do have the overview of the broadband expansion plan as far as the fiber optic. So just for those of you who don't know, Wilkes Telephone Membership Cooperative is our parent company. It's a telephone cooperative in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, established back in 1951. The size of the company, we have approximately 30,000 accounts. 23,000 of those is in North Carolina and 7,000 in Virginia. We're still expanding in Virginia. We have over 173 million in assets, about $60 million in revenue, and we currently have around 220 employees. Again, River Street Networks is wholly owned, and we serve 5 states: North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. Here's a map of our current servicing areas and projects. You can see darker green is fiber networks. Lighter green is where we have copper networks that we're overbuilding into fiber networks. We also have some coax networks that we acquired that we're looking at overbuilding. And then we have our fiber projects that we have on the CAF2. And then I'll show you here later what we're looking at RDOF. For those who don't know CAF2, and I'll have a set of definitions here. So CAF2 was an auction through the FCC to companies were able to do a reverse auction and bid on census blocks on where they would design or build networks to provide broadband services. It was a reverse auction, so basically what happened was they offered so much money, those interested in doing it said we'll do it for that. Then the auction went, they offered a little bit less money. Those who are still interested said we'll do it for that. And they kept going down until they met what they call the clearing round, which is they met all the funding mechanisms they had in place, and whoever was left that was still willing to do it were awarded those blocks. So the same thing happened here just in the last year. That was called the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. It was on phase 1. That was done off of what we call a census block group. As you can see there, census block group is a group of census blocks. Each census block is different in size, but it typically has so many residents in the block. Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that when the FCC looked at this, if you had one household in the block able to retrieve the service, then they saw everybody in the block is being served. And that's part of the issues that they have, is that this is based off their current mapping. And the FCC is working on that mapping. But they had $20.4 billion. They decided in round 1 they were going to award $16.4 billion. They ended up only awarding about $9 billion because there were a lot of large providers in there that drove the pricing down. And we're still waiting to see if those providers that drove the pricing down will even end up building their blocks. Because if they don't, they just have to pay a small fine and turn the money back into the FCC. Okay. So definitions to keep in mind as we talk about this stuff. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll stop. In your county, what we're looking at right now, you have the following companies that are providing broadband services. According to the FCC, broadband services is anything 25 and 3 or greater. So that's 25 megs down and 3 megs up. These are companies, you can see that they have the number of blocks that are being provided and then the percentage of the company. So right now, the largest provider in the county is Cox Communications. They have both a fiber network and a cable network. Here's what that looks like on a map. It shows you where you supposedly have services and the number of providers in those areas providing the services. Here's what the RDOF look like. So currently in the RDOF auction, RSN, River Street Networks, was able to bid on several of the census blocks, and we're getting funding to pass 1,183 locations. But you can see they're not all contiguous. They're scattered throughout the county. Also, a company called SpaceX, that's Elon Musk's thing, company, they were awarded 89 locations, and they're up in the northwestern part of the county, right there on the border of Hanover, and there's also some down here on the southeastern part. Now, there's another company, it's called Connect Everyone. Connect Everyone was awarded 32 locations, that's the blue. Their parent company is called a company called Starry, and it's yet to be known whether or not they're going to be doing fiber to the home or some sort of hybrid wireless service, okay? The Virginia State program called VATI, they do not recognize SpaceX as an awarded area because they don't believe that technology is going to work or meet the needs and it was being funded for. So right now, if you look at any type of upcoming VATI auctions, there's an opportunity to get funding in those areas as well because the state doesn't recognize those as being broadband funded areas. So what I want to do is I'm going to give you an overview of what the county looks like if you were to build a fiber to the home network throughout. Now again, this is fiber going from each home back to a main area, and then from there it's concentrated into a large data hut, and that all is connected via a backbone, a ring. And then there's multiple connections from that ring out to internet service providers or upstream providers so that you have some redundancy and resiliency. So here's a map of the county. First thing we do is we take the county, we break it up into servicing areas. We have 3 servicing areas based on the size of the county. We have 3 remotes that we put in and tie them together with the backbone, which is what you see there. And then we start layering in different fiber counts, everything from 400 down to 12 strands. So you see the number of fibers laying in there. It starts building out. And the reason why it's built out that way is when you put in the GIS information that we were provided, or where the locations, you'll see that we're passing all the homes or all the locations on the GIS system with fiber, so that you can connect them back to the ring and then connect the ring onto the internet. So I'm going to go over just an overview of what these costs look like and with the map. So here's a little bit closer map. This is just showing you the backbone itself. So that's where the backbone would be running in the county. That's about 66.77 miles. It would pass 269 homes along its route. The cost to install that is just under $3 million. If you were to estimate a 30% take ratio, there's an additional $3 million to connect those locations, or an additional amount to bring it up to about $3.1 million. If you were to connect all the homes, it'd be about 3.5. Now, again, with River Street, we take on the connection fee. So if you were to build a fiber network and partner with us, we cover the cost of connecting any home up to 1,200 feet off of that main. Normally, it is a state maintained road. Okay, so that way your residents aren't having to pay $500 or $399 or $299, right? We cover that cost. That's part of our cost of doing business.
What happens to the dirt road with only 2 houses down at the end of, and that's a state maintained dirt road?
So that's one of the reasons why when we get into the details of it, we work with the county and the GIS to say, okay, what are roads that we need to take a look at where one, that they might be private roads. So we need to take a look at getting easements or right of ways to those people. Or two, it might be a dirt road, but it's maintained by the county. Or it might be a private road, but it's within the 1,200 feet. Or what do we need to do? You know, it might be you say, hey, we've got some roads we want to also look at adding services on, and we can take a look and see what the additional cost would be to build out for those roads as well. Okay. All right. So looking at the cost. So this is just the cost. So this is the cost of building the trunk lines, right? So again, this is the cost to build out off of that ring and build out the trunk lines. So looking at that, that's 560 miles of fiber. You would pass the 11,143 homes that we have on the information that we provided. It's $22 million to do that. And if you get a 30% take ratio, or only 3,323 people or locations signing up for it, it'd be about $29 million. If everybody was to sign up, it's about 46. Now you got to add that in. So here's the total view, right? So here's the total view of the county with the backbone and all the other fiber strands heading out. And you can see there, we're giving you the cost in the different print. We give you the cost per those areas as well, those zones, what it costs in those zones as well. And here's the total. So the total county build would be 627 miles of fiber. It would pass 11,412 homes. If nobody got connected, if you just passed the home with fiber, it's $25 million just to pass the home with fiber. If you were to get at least a 30% take, which we think is nowadays a low estimate, normally rural areas, you're looking closer to a 60% take. Especially with COVID, you're looking at even higher numbers in areas because of the recognition that broadband is now more of a utility than it is a luxury. So anyways, you're looking at about 32 million there, or if you end up building out to every home, it'd be about 49. So any questions on that? What we'd like to do while we're here, if Juan could, what we'd like to do is prime the discussion of what are the next steps? How do we go from there? How do we get what we're looking at? How do we make that happen? All right.
So I have a question, Mr.
Sure.
So let's say we're gonna pay for 100% take, and we're gonna pay $49 million. But if anybody is further away than 1,200 feet, they still pay a fee?
No. So here's the deal. First of all, you wouldn't pay $49 million. Okay. So it's not one of those things, if you build it, they will come, right? You're not going to get 100%. Okay. So what we would recommend is we look at building out the area, working with you all. We would set up a mechanism that we would gauge interest on where the most demand is and where the one is. We would come up with a plan to build out that network, and then we would start connecting people. Now, what I was saying is most groups, they only will connect within 300 feet, right? If you're within 300 feet of their stuff, then they'll connect you. If you're not, they're going to charge you hundreds of dollars to get connected. Or thousands, right? What we do is we're saying, if you're within 1,200 feet of us, we'll do a drop and connect you. If you're beyond that, then we'll tell you what the delta is, right? We estimate the average cost to connect a home somewhere between $2,040 to $2,140. Okay, so that's what we take on. So what you're looking at up there, there's $25 million, but we brought to the county some funding from the federal government in RR. So,
yeah, I just wanted to go back and touch on the concern about the drops, because I don't want y'all to have any questions about that. But typically, if there's a dirt road, there's people living down there, you already have those on your GIS records, and they were supplied with us.
Yeah.
So in our design, every home that's in the county with GIS is represented in that build cost.
Okay.
So if you're concerned that somebody might get left out, they were allocated in the cost to do that. Occasionally, we do run into some oddities where we have some really weird situations, but we, as Rob alluded to earlier, we are owned by an independent cooperative. And we have a very strong cooperative dynamic about how we do business. So when we come in to serve a community, even though River Street is our for-profit subsidiary of the cooperative, we treat our customers like they're co-op members. They get the same price as our co-op territories. We don't have separate pricing for one or the other. And so I just wanted to give you a sense of feel about how we would treat the customers here. And we would make sure that in the build design, whatever we end up agreeing to work with the county on, we're going to try to make sure that we are committed to the costs of the engineering plan.
Okay.
So again, what we've got here is just something for you guys to review it, to start a possible follow-on discussion to how we move forward. All right. So if you flip to the third page there, it shows you the locations. So we've got 1,183 locations that the federal government is giving us funding capacity. It's a 6-year bill. Okay. The total funding, we don't get about $2.7 million. We get that over a 10-year period. So that means we have to front a lot of the cost. And again, that cost isn't enough to cover the whole bill. There's a delta there. And that's what we have down at the bottom. That's that shortfall. All right. So we're looking to say, look, if you guys can help us, if you go to the next page, if you can help us with filling that shortfall, then we can expedite the bill. And instead of getting it done in 6 years, we can get it done in 3 years. Now, if you go to the following page where it talks about the KQ, what I'm talking to you about is basically where we were with King and Queen County about 2 years ago. And we're in the process right now of building out their county fiber to the home. And the top item there, that shows you how we went about doing it. We had federal funds in the form of CAF, okay, and you guys have RDOF funds in the form of CAF. They were able to have some CARES money. There's a possibility that you may have ARP money. We were able to go out and secure FATI funding. We haven't talked about FATI, but that's an opportunity we can look at with you. And then we were given local funding, a backstop. And that backstop, we have been going out after additional funding to reduce that and reduce that and reduce that. And then the money that we're bringing to the table. All right. And again, that money is only based off of a 30%. So we know that our investment in that county could be double or triple that. But because we'll be hooking up customers, that's over so many years, plus we're getting that revenue return. Okay. So if you look at the bottom part, this is what it would look like if you guys decided we would want to do a total fiber to the whole build, how it would work out. If you go to the next page, again, that was a snapshot that we had up there earlier. On the side, it shows what the cost is. I mean, you're looking at almost $5,570 to pass the home. And we got from them, from the federal government, we got around 1,000 or something, right? So if you go to the following page, that's another map that I kind of broke it out to show you, again, what the RDOF blocks will look at. And you see the black line, that's where that backbone is being done. So you can see that the issue is you don't have all the connection there. We would have to redo something to get that to work, to be more feasible. So the next to the last page there is a summary. And so what we're asking, what we'd like to have a discussion on in the future is how do we go about getting the funding to expedite the RDOF build? And while we're doing that, if we look at building the backbone in as well, then we're trying to take the county into a total fiber build or a total fiber to the home build over 6 years, right? And so the next page gives you what the funding model would look like. And again, we're just talking to you now as a preliminary possible discussion. In the future, if you guys want to sit down and tell us, all right, how does this look formally? What does this look like? Now, one of the things we have in there, you can see that As you build out, you can start connecting homes. That's where you have the homes passed versus the cutover homes. And again, that's at a 30% ratio. One of the items there also is, when we did this with King and Queen, and when we do this with almost any county that provides funding, we provide them a recurring revenue share so that, they're giving us an aid to construction, and we recognize that aid to construction is so as we get to that 30% number of customers served, then we start providing a revenue share, and that goes up based off the number of percentages, right? So if we go higher than 30%, then there's an increase in their revenue share as well. So anyway, these are the items that we would like to do as a follow-up with you all to discuss. Here's where we're at now. Here's where we're at with the federal funding that we have. Here's what it would look like to build out total fiber to the home in the whole county. And here's the funding mechanisms that are out there to get that done. Any questions? I know it's a lot, but that's why, this is just the introduction. More than happy to come up here and have more detailed discussion on it.
And we don't, obviously, we expect no decision making on any of this today. We wanted to plant this discussion in your thought, and we would like to come back and work with you through maybe a work session where we could do a deeper dive. And we just really wanted to kind of scratch the surface today to show you that not only have we presented to you a vision of a countywide plan, but also we have done a lot of thought around how to fund it.
Just real quick, so on page 3 or 4, the served unserved area, cost to build is $6.5 million, and the shortfall.
Yeah, so that's just with the RDOF. That's just with the RDOF blocks. That's just
Okay.
at 1,183. And see, that's an issue. The federal government, when they did this RDOF, they said that your county has that 1,183 plus the 89 here plus the 32 there. They're saying that you have only about 2,000 locations in your county. Out of the 11,000 locations, you only have about 2,000 locations that don't have broadband service, that don't already have 25/3. And we know that's not the case. And that's because the mapping issue, that is again, like I said, with the sheriff there, if he has service, we're all one census block, and if the sheriff has broadband service there, then the federal government sees that we all have service. And we can be miles away from each other, and that's not the case. And so that's one of the reasons why you find yourself in the situation you're in. I mean, the state doesn't recognize it either because they're using the federal maps and they're working on it. But that is an issue. So that when I looked at that, that is just for us to build off the RDOF blocks.
I think we might have mentioned this the last time we spoke with you guys, but River Street actually participated in a national study through a company called CostQuest and US Telecom. And if you go out there and you Google CostQuest mapping study, there's tons of information that you can find out. But there's a really good presentation that CostQuest has on their website. And Virginia, and I believe it was Missouri, were the two states that they used to do this test. And what they looked at was land records. They looked at a bunch of layers of how broadband is currently assessed, predominantly with the individual census blocks. But they layered on top of that more knowledge about where people are that need to be served. And what they found in Virginia alone was that it was about 35 to 38% inaccurate. So one of the things I like to just kind of toy with in my mind is if you go out and look on the internet, and if you go to the FCC's website and you look up a map of served area of deficits of broadband, where broadband is not available in Virginia, and you kind of blur your eyes and think of what 35% more of whatever that color is would be, it's tremendous for the state. And so they're in the process of creating what has been proposed to the FCC through US Telecom and CostQuest as what's called the fabric method. And that's where they take all these layers to determine where people really need service and what's being served. So.
Well, leave it to the federal government to throw billions of dollars at a program where they don't know where they need to spend it, so.
That was one of the big complaints, is that everybody was thinking the RDOF funding wasn't gonna come out until they updated the maps, but they decided to let it out earlier. And so all the money, and again, in the first round, they were supposed to award 16.4, they only awarded about 9 billion because the funding got driven down by these large players. And now they're still trying to decide how they're going to update the maps. Not sure how long that's going to take, but we see sometime in the horizon, we're thinking probably in the next 2 to 3 years, they'll do the RDOF phase 2, and that's going to be at least another $9 to $10 billion there.
Yeah, but we're talking about over a period of 6 years. So, I mean, they tell you they're throwing $9 billion at the program, but in reality, it's 1.5, because if you need the money now, that's why this is gonna take 6 years to build out, because they're doling out the money
The funding's over 10
fractions at a
years.
time.
The funding's over 10 years, so we don't get the money. They allow us up to 6 years to build after they start awarding the funding, but they award the funding over 10 years, so it's up to us to find the differential or the shortfall to make it happen.
So if you have the money, can we build it faster than 6 years?
That's why we said if you can help us get it funded, like we were talking about, then we can build it in 3 years.
Well, the backbone we can build in 3 years.
Well, no, that was the RDOF, yeah.
Right, the RDOF we
Yeah.
can build in 3 years.
Yes.
But the entire project scope of what we're talking about for your entire county, it would take us at least 6 years. We've built multiple networks like this, and from the day one, when you start ordering materials to the point in time when you have the central offices built and equipped to serve the customers, the backhaul links to the outside world to serve the customers, the backbone built, all the spokes off the backbone and getting to the customers, it'll take 3 years before you can serve the first customer.
But as you see, you could start adding customers in a little bit earlier than that. It just depends on how the build goes. But the main issue to keep in mind is that because of COVID, the need for broadband services has been exponentially increased. So the purchasing of fiber has increased, or the manufacturing capabilities has been impacted because of shutdowns and transportation issues and so on and so forth. You also have the amount of crews is remained the same, so there's there's a little bit of a lag there on getting additional people to install it. So one of the things we're talking about, if this is something you want to do, our timeline is looking at starting January next year, but we really need to start getting the discussions and everything lined up to get that ready. We don't have until January to start the discussions. We need to start starting the discussions now, because we know it's going to take several months to get everything in place, to get your desires, your needs in place, get contracts in place, get the process started. So.
Well, if we're gonna provide, it looks like on one of these slides, close to 70% of the funding coming from local.
If we can't go out and get additional money, right? So on one of the slides, it shows you all the different funding mechanisms. We have USDA we can possibly get funding from. We have the state of Virginia we can possibly get funding from. We have the RDOF 2 we can possibly get from. There's a lot of different things we can do. Again, that's why we call that a backstop. That's one of the things King and Queen County recognizes, that because when we looked at it, we said we could come in and just build these CAF blocks. We could come in and just build your RDOF blocks. But then you're going to have complaints from other citizens as to why do they have it and I don't have it, and I don't have service either. Well, that's because the FCC thinks you have service, but we don't. So one of the things we said is we can, and that's the other thing too, is once you start the process, it's more cost effective to keep building as it is to stop and say, all right, we'll come back a year or two from now and pick this back up once we find the money again. So to do that, King and Queen said, no, we want to make sure once we start this, we continue this until it's completed. And so our agreement with them is we would work, they're providing the backstop, but we're working with them to find other fundings to reduce that backstop as much as possible.
And kind of probably in the same discussion, the federal government has always kind of funded based on a ceiling of speed, and that has kept rising and rising and rising. So you think about how we went from dial-up, we had like ISDN, we went to DSL service, all over copper. And fiber was really a game changer, because when fiber is configured the right way, or as we proposed in this design, you can provide a gig of service to every customer. And so this network that we're talking about designing is what we consider, and we use the term future-proof, in the fact that even though the federal government only says anything under 25.3 is underserved, our appetite for broadband is continuously growing. So where 25.3 is what they consider the lowest to be, anything under that is unserved, they will change that again, and they'll change it again and again and again. What we're producing for you here is a vision for a network that will cover you years and years and years down the road, decades. So one fiber to the home for a customer, giving them up to a gig of service, will allow them to grow exponentially into whatever they need. It creates economic development landscape that is really kind of the desire of so many counties. And that's why we have right now, we have a chunk of counties that are asking us to work with them to do this. And so as Rob talks to you about the supply and demand chain, think about all the federal money and all the state money and all the local money that's being pushed in the direction of broadband. Think about how quickly the manufacturers can produce fiber, how much is backstopped and ready to be able to be sold. We're seeing current delays. We have a national contract with one of the largest fiber producers in the nation, in the world. And even with our contract with them, we are seeing delays as far out as anywhere from 4 to 6 months. And so that's just now, and the money's not been released yet. So we almost have this concern of, okay, are we going to get to a point where fiber is going to be really hard to get? How about the electronics that are going to be needed? If this is actually happening in 50 states all across the country due to federal funding, the ones that have a broadband expansion plan, a design, a blueprint, the ones who are already thinking about how they want to spend the monies that they have available to help advance a private provider to come on in and serve when there's not a business case for that private provider to do it on their own. That's the things that we're presenting for you to consume today so that you can start getting your head wrapped around this. And then we come back and sit down and really do a deep dive where we can be a lot more descriptive to you about how we came up with all of this. So
What is your time frame for that?
that is your time frame. We are at your leisure. So if we have to come back 6 times to talk with you, if we have to come back 2 times, if we have to come back 12 times, we're devoted to helping see you through understanding the decisions and the choices that you feel like you need to make for your constituents.
You said it probably would take at least a 6-year build out.
3 years for the first connect, 6 years to build out.
And then you said the federal government and the state government don't recognize SpaceX as Elon Musk.
Right, so one of the first opportunities would be to go in there and take a look at trying to go after that funding for the again, that was, what was it, 80 some homes
Yeah.
up in that one area.
Because I know they've been calling around, getting $100. So, I think, for that.
Yeah.
Because when you think in 6 years, that's probably, that technology, the big state federal think it's not gonna be anything, but I would bet against Elon Musk.
I want to
state federal government.
correct, I want to make sure that we're not saying this wrong. The federal government doesn't say that SpaceX isn't going to be a solution.
Right.
It will be a solution. There are concerns that have been posed by many companies about whether or not they will truly be able to provide gig-based service. And so then it comes down to decision makers like yourself who are trying to decide if you want to inject funding into a program to fast track your guarantee that your constituents get the best network in the country, which would be a fiber to the home build. Then, you know, satellite's never going to do that. Satellite will be great for those people who are way out, who just don't have any other choice, that it will bridge a gap, but we don't know exactly, right now, none of it's been proven.
Right.
So they actually funded a technology for the first time that has never been completely proven. And we know fiber's proven. We've been building fiber networks now since 2012.
Yeah, but every time SpaceX puts out a release, it's faster, the latency is, I mean, it's proving itself to get to that point. And my concern, I'm all for fiber to the home, but my concern is that as that technology grows and that ability is apparent, that the take rate for fiber to the home is going to be significantly impacted. Because if I can place an order today, and I actually have, I'm supposed to get my equipment sometime this summer. And I'm just doing it as an experiment. I just want to see, does it really do what they say it's going to do?
But at the same time, what's the charge for your equipment? Is it
$400.
What's that?
$400.
$400. And that's a hurdle for some people.
And we charge zero.
I understand that. I'm not comparing the two other than to say it is a concern, because if you tell me that I've got to wait 6 years, and I'm probably in that 6-year point on the map, and I can get it this summer, then when you come down my road, I'm going to ask you why.
Well, when we come down your road, then the customer actually has an option now to go to a more reliable line provided service. And the pricing will set the standard for whether the customer switches or not.
Yeah.
So we have this dialogue that's going on across the country right now. When we talk to counties, the problem that the counties encounter a lot is they're covering their entire constituents. You've got the haves and the have-nots. The haves, in many cases, still don't feel like they have reliable broadband because they're getting a service that's not quite as good, but it's better than the person that's 25 miles out in the country that has nothing. And so you got this constant fight and battle. The one in the country says, well, get me service first, because I have nothing. At least Joe over here has something. And so if you've got a fiber network that covers your entire county, you give everybody the same playing field, but you also catapult your county into a competitive environment, which is not something that we typically deal with. We typically build to areas that nobody wants to serve because that's what the cooperative formula was created for. That's what we were doing 70 years ago. And so if, in fact, SpaceX turns out to be a good solution, and your county's already built fiber everywhere, your county also now has a competitive option. And if people want to go with satellite, they can go with satellite. But I still think that the fiber will be more reliable. I think the fiber will be just as cost affordable, if not better, than the satellite provided service.
I agree with that. So the network that you guys are putting together would be considered an open access network.
No.
You're providing content, or are you just providing a connection?
We would provide internet services to it. So, but it would be unrestricted, there's no throttling on it, but when you say open access, it's not like we're going to be allowing other providers to provide services on it,
I think what he meant to say is that our internet service does not have any kind of, we don't prevent, it's an open network where customers can consume all the internet they want. It's no metered service. And we don't, prioritize any traffic over the other. Except, well, I take that back. If we're providing phone service to the customer, then we give phone service a priority because it's considered a lifeline technology. But phone service is such a small amount of the data set that's going across that line. So an open access network would be something like the city of Danville built, where they allow providers to connect to the fiber, multiple providers, and then they run the fiber to every customer. And then the customer itself chooses among multiple providers to serve them.
And we're on the Danville network, but we're the only one there doing residential. The other providers only do businesses.
So at your next, I know you did it, I believe, when we initially talked, but you will bring to us the estimated cost to the actual homeowner?
Oh, you mean, would they pay their monthly service? Oh, yes. Yes.
And 100 by 100 symmetrical
Is what we,
is our slowest speed on fiber.
and I want to say it's currently around 70 or $75. And then there are low income discounts that are applicable to that as well. And that,
What is the 1 gig?
I think it's the 1 gig service is like residential is around $250.
Yeah.
And so what we have found over the years is that as customers consume more broadband, the prices tend to stay around about the same, but the packages increase to give more broadband, more bandwidth. And I know for those who might be listening and are concerned about, well, how much broadband do I actually need? If you think of a 4K television, a 4K television stream is going to pull 25 meg consistently to that TV. The FCC says 25 meg and under is considered unserved. So the bar is already really, really low. We would love to see the FCC change the ruling to say that 100 by 100 is symmetrical. Anything under that is putting people at a huge disadvantage. And think about our post-COVID attack and what we've had to deal with, people being at home, husbands, wives, children, everybody putting that demand on that network. And we're going to consume more. The average amount of devices in the home today is just increasing exponentially. Alarm systems, security, cameras, refrigerators, everything is connecting to the internet now. And each time that is connecting, it's using just a little bit more bandwidth in the home or the business. And that's the other thing that, we keep saying fiber to the home, fiber to the home. This is a fiber to everyone design. So all of your businesses in the county, whether they're small business, enterprise, or industrial type businesses or complexes, they would have fiber past them as well. So it leverages your opportunity for you to bring industry and other things into your county as a veteran community for Richmond.
Yes, Mr. Chair. In my meetings with Mr. Lon Westall, he stated back then, a year ago, that it would take approximately 6 years, but he also stated that in the intro time that there could be temporary antennas put up on existing towers throughout the county to serve some of our citizens and not wait 6 years. Nothing you discussed today even addressed that.
Well, again, I was telling you at the beginning, the wireless portion isn't completed yet. So that's part of this plan. And so once we have that, then we can present that to you as well. The wireless engineers are still working.
When we build these plans, we start with the fiber plan first because a wireless vertical asset is only maximized for good quality broadband that has a fiber connection to it at the base. And so we take the ring, that dark ring that you saw on there, and we would utilize that to create spokes off the ring to all the available vertical assets you have in the county. The ones that are too far to reach from the ring, then we would do a wireless backhaul. But we're building a design for you that shows you what that would look like and what that cost would be. And that is a solution that could be used. And some counties are opting to put that in while they're building. Some counties are opting to just say, look, we're just gonna go ahead and push hard as we can to get. We don't see the need to say.
That's great if you're one of the ones like Mr. Lockwood said, you're gonna be one of the ones waiting 6 years. But if you could put up a temporary antenna on a tower, an existing tower, or a water tower, whatever, to service that part of the county, they don't wait 6 years.
That's right.
They could get, what, 2 years?
2 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, that sounds a lot better than telling the citizens you gotta wait 6 years.
That's right. Right. But you still have to build that backbone.
You
And
still
that
have to
backbone will take 3 years.
Right.
So it's like.
So that's like if I wanted to buy a Lamborghini,
You get
that's
your board of
good down,
supervisors.
Saving.
that's good down the road, but in the meantime, I need a car to drive.
Right. That's right. And we'll come back and present that wireless project just as here. And hopefully we'll have it complete maybe by the time we come back to talk to you about the financials a little deeper.
I appreciate that.
And then we can give you a more holistic approach of all of it.
How long do you think that'll take?
On the wireless, I would say within a month or two. We're getting fairly close on it now. So,
That's when I think, so in 2 months, come to a work session, we discuss that and the finance?
Sure.
and if we get it done quicker, we can let him know, and then we can be here sooner. And I would really like to make that a roll up the sleeves kind of work session, and we do it, take as much time as you guys want. If you could isolate that work session, and we'll give you as much of our time as you want.
Yep.
I think, I mean, I think this is, I think I speak for the board on this, that is a top priority for us, so, yeah.
I would say we would even call a special meeting.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yep.
Want to get this and come on.
But these are preliminary reasons that these guys will finalize. That's okay. Thank you.
I have a recipe on mine.
All right.
Well, the citizens bureau, do we have a copy of that presentation?
The one that I just sent out, I can see email it on the electronic copy of that.
Those that you could put on the website.
Again, we thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we'll see you at least 2 months.
Okay, no, if not soon.
If not,
Soon will be better.
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, guys.
Item 2, presentation of new safety manual, CDO, supplemental policy, and group medical plan look back policy, and proposed updates to employee personnel policy manual.
All right. Good morning, everybody. You all had binders given to you. Looks like you guys have them with you. So in that, the first item is our safety manual. This currently does not exist within Newton County. We worked with JJ Keller over the course of a year in combination with some other departments to create that policy manual from scratch. A lot of that stuff had to do with OSHA regulations, all kinds of different things that were not currently in place, including VRSA regulations, to get our discount that we are now at 100% on our safety rating with VRSA, getting a 20% discount. That's all kind of wraps into that. Also, we did have a VOSH random inspection during the course of the manual being done. They did ask for some of these policies in draft format, which we did provide them, and that is the only reason that we passed the VOSH inspection. So does anybody have any questions about the first item, the safety manual?
I just can't believe all the stuff.
Yeah.
I need to tell you what size gloves to wear.
As you can imagine, Newton County didn't even have safety policies in place like that at all. So this was literally created from scratch. It is something long overdue. And so our plan is to send it to a printer, get some nice bound copies that they can take with them, hold with them, hopefully refer to quite often, get them to sign a receipt and get it into their employee file.
You could have my copy.
Who worked on this with it? Was it just?
JJ Keller, I partnered with them. Public Utilities agreed to half that cost with HR to get it done, so they worked hand in hand with me a lot. We have a safety committee that we created this year. They worked a lot. And then any policy that directly had to do with certain departments, so say Parks and Rec or Utility Sheriff's Office was sent to them.
I guess that was my question.
Yep.
Supervisors.
Yeah, and then once we had a final format, Rodney got it after the department heads had all received it, and the safety committee as well. So, yes, they've all seen it. And there's a draft format on ESS for all employees to give any feedback that they've had as well.
Anybody have any questions?
The next item is the employee handbook. There's a list there of all the corrections that we've made. Not a lot of things, honestly, a few little typos that we found on 4 different pages that we've corrected. ADA language is updated on page 15. There were some laws that had changed that we had to go with Brendan for advice on how to change that. Page 21, we had to add some ACA language. Previously, the manual just said that we would follow the regulations, but our broker determined that that wasn't sufficient. So we had to create an ADA look or ACA look back document So on page 21, we just said refer to that document. That way it's easier to update as laws change. Page 31 to 32 are the holidays. We updated that to go with the state calendar. Page 37 to 39, we corrected work days to hours. We've had some issues with different departments and their work day hours are different. And then 45 to 47, the emergency closing, we clarified some of that. And then lastly, 79 to 82, this has to do with the CDL policy, which is the next bullet. The Federal Clearinghouse came out with some regulations last year in reference to CDL drivers if they use it in connection with their employment here, that they have to have a certain drug and alcohol testing procedure done. So we just told them to refer to the CDL supplemental policy. Currently, that only is our public utilities drivers. So that's the only department that's affected right now. But for instance, if Parks and Recs hires a bus driver, that could follow under that. There are others that could in the future fall under that. So that's the CDL policy in the third bullet. Does anybody have any questions about the employee manual changes?
Does that include smoking pot?
I knew he was going to ask.
No, there has been no changes in the manual in reference to the drug policy that we have here.
But that is a big issue, something that we want.
I know that, I mean, right now,
Well, it's
Are we
still
ready to
illegal
just-
federally, I mean,
It's still
illegal
federal.
federally, and we are still required, we're still not allowing employees to be under the influence. As laws change, we'll continue to look at that, but I like the stance that we're currently taking. Should
But
not
they
be-
folks can go and smoke right.
For
Yeah.
tobacco.
Cigarettes.
Well, but when marijuana becomes legal, they're allowed to have a,
Currently, the way our stand is no, they can't be under, they cannot smoke pot.
I mean, not that we have any folks who want to do that, but.
So the other challenge that we have, so I attended a Versa training. I don't know if you had time to watch the recording of it, but they discussed a lot of things. As right now, there's no testing. If somebody smokes marijuana, there's no testing that can tell you if they get pulled for a random tomorrow when they smoked the marijuana. So they're going to pop positive on something, because they can't be under influence while at work, but there's no testing that is definite enough to tell you when it happened right now. So there was a lot of talk on that, and like I said, the CDL drivers will never be allowed to, because that's a federal unless that changes. You also have some safety positions like sheriff's office and fire that will never be able to. So we have to figure out as a county, as these things change, one, will there be a test that can tell us at that time, is it in their system or was it last week? And two, are we going to treat certain definitions of our staff differently? Because we have at least half of our staff that cannot and will not be able to. So we have to figure out, treating all employees fairly. If we have over half of our staff that are not able to, or we can have different drug testing standards for different. That has not been determined yet. So right now, we have left everything the same as far as our policies. Good change. We just did that.
Yeah. I'm just here.
Okay. And then the last bullet here is the ACA, look back here, that is in conjunction with One Digital. They helped us with that document. Any questions about any of them? I know that was a lot of good reading material.
no, but thank you for getting us up to date on all this information, especially the safety manual. So next time OSHA pays us a visit, we'll be able to present one that's in effect. Good job.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
We are requesting that the board take action on the items, and yes, I will ask for 4 separate motions. You can hold on.
all right, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move to adopt the proposed New Kent County Safety Manual, and I also move to adopt the proposed CDL supplement policy, as well as to adopt the proposed group medical plan look-back policy, and lastly, to adopt the proposed updates to the New Kent Personnel and Policy Manual.
Thank you, Mr. Lockwood. Ms. Watkins, poll numbers.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Ms. Page?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
And Mr. Evelyn?
Next up is Pine Point Park update.
Are y'all okay if I sit? Good morning, how are y'all doing? Y'all come from marijuana to talking to Wi-Fi and all kinds of fun things this morning. But I wanted to say good morning to the members this morning of the board and staff, and I'd also like to invite Mr. Hathaway, Mr. Stoddard, and Mr. Baldwin if they have comments throughout our presentation, if you'd accept those from them as well. We're excited to bring you what's hopefully one of the last updates on phase one of Tyne Park. We know over the past couple of months, we've shared some of our weekly reports that we've had just to keep you in real time, and hopefully that's been helpful to you with any questions you may have from constituents or just for yourself, general knowledge there. But phase one is approaching completion, but there's still a few items that we need to discuss to successfully and safely complete phase one of the park. There's a little PowerPoint, it looks like it was printed out, just kind of for myself as well as for you. Just a little background. I know this has been a little bit of a challenging project, but I really think we're going to deliver a quality park to our residents. I think it's something that we just had some Facebook things this morning asking, when are we opening? When are we going to be there? We can't wait to use the playground and different things like that. But just a brief background, we are still under 2 years from when we broke ground. I know it's a little bit later than we anticipated, but overall, we're still in a good spot. We're hoping to have our grand opening in July, which will coordinate with our groundbreaking from 2 years ago. Just if you want to see back there, in 2018, it's good. Sorry, Rod, Mr. Hathaway, we're almost going to be that far. We started with an estimate of close to $8 million for this park, for the first phase of it going into that. And we knew as a county, we needed to start where we were comfortable with what we wanted to do. And we reduced that amount by adopting a phased approach to the park, which right now we are in phase one, which is the most expensive phase. And we also decided to work with individual contracts versus putting out the whole project to bid, because that we were hoping that might reduce things as well. When we looked at the part, just there's some phasing there, just kind of tells you we did move some things out of phase one and move those into the second phase for future capital projects such as lights. We did make a decision as a county to go ahead and put in the conduit and things like that based on recommendations from construction, because it would be cheaper, now to put that in versus later. And then we have had some grants and different things, and some of the things that we did cut out were able to be supported by CARES funding, as well as some other grants and funding that we've been able to secure. Under the phase one funding, just a reminder what we had kind of put there, Bruce Howard contracting was the main construction. That included a lot of things, everything from after the trees were cleared out to just getting to where we are now. That contract originally came in close to $5 million, and we did bring that to the board, and we were encouraged to shave that down a little bit, and we shaved off about close to $1 million on that. However, since then, we've had some change orders. Some are kind of beyond our control, which we brought to you guys in January, with some of the stormwater management and the DEQ and some of those types of issues that we had. And then some other things, like a house, we just didn't know it till we got in there and saw it. We are the concession in the back building. I hope and I told Mr. Hathaway, I would love to take any of you out at any time. You just have to have your little hard hat on, but we'd be more than happy to show you around. The concession in the back building, we came back to you with a contract on that. We cut out about $10,000 off of that, just to get that down to where we wanted it. And then we do thank you for your support. We came back to you in October of 2020 for some additional funding, and then in 2021 in January, that's when we came to you with more of those, some of the design issues and different things there. But I'm happy to report phase one construction, the concession in the back building probably be ready, they're anticipating around June. However, we're working with Centennial Contracting to ensure they're getting ready. We'll find out today, actually, they were putting doors, and once they secure that building and no one can get in there, once we complete some other areas, we should be able to do what we call a soft opening of the park. So we can actually have people start coming in there, maybe using the walking path, maybe using the playground once we complete the mulching and things like that. And then we're hoping to have more of a grand opening in July. And we're looking at staggering that throughout the month. Because it's National Parks and Rec Month, but try to target different areas. We're looking at a little, Mr. Hathaway, we kind of joked around, we want a little softball tournament out there maybe. So anybody want to throw out the open and pitch? No? Mr. Davis said he would come back and do it if nobody wanted to. So we're going to try to really incorporate some fun things into those openings, but target on different groups that are out there. Also, just to report, and if you have any specific questions, I will defer to Mr. Stoddard in his expert area, but the stormwater management, the redesign, the issues that we talked about in January with the DEQ, all of that has been completed. And to my knowledge, do you know anything additional with that? I mean, it was completed successfully and we should be good to go, which is a huge, huge hurdle that we needed to get over. And then also with the phase 1 contract with Bruce Howard Contracting, there's very few things left on that. They did some paving last week. I've not been out there this week to see, but we'll find out this afternoon at our construction meeting. But there's minimal items on the remainder of their contract that needs to be done. And they were just waiting for the construction, the concession building to get underway there. And today what we need to do, we really need to review some of the items that we need to complete phase 1. I know there was some question about, why didn't you include this in the original budget? We did include some of these things, but then when we decided to do the phased approach and work with different contracts, some of those things were taken out. So we're putting them back in. So if you have questions about which items were maybe originally there but taken out or why we need them, we'll be more than happy to discuss that. We have done some additional research and some of the numbers have gone down, but unfortunately some of the numbers with construction are definitely going up. So we really want to either make some decisions of what we need to do now, get it in there. If not, deferring some things, some of the things we need, like mulching on the playground, we have to do that to open it up. And were those numbers originally included? Some of them were, some of them weren't. When we came back with matching grants and different things there. But who has the budget? Do you want to stand up here and pull Jason up, because he's done some of the research on these numbers for us. And I know, I see Mr. Clark and Ms. Guthrie back there. We still have a few things I need to work through with them, but that's a finance, just some back numbers, getting some things straight.
Right.
But I'll let you go through the budget.
Right, well, like Kim said, first thing, all the stormwater has been completed, so, and we received the funding for that. But moving to item 3, we proposed, a budget for a maintenance building. I know that y'all asked us to come up with some more numbers on that. We basically took the building and cut it in half to 2,500 square feet instead of 5,000 square feet. And after looking at different internet sites, also talking to contractors, some of those prices, like Mr. Sears, you sent to us, a website, that only included the shell of the building. It did not include a slab, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and the construction cost of it. The pricing that I've received from different, and one who has done work with us before, Henderson Contracting, was anywhere between $155,000 to I've got $360,000 just for a 2,500 square foot OSHA regulated building and things like that. In order to get a better pricing, I believe we would have to, send it out and see what a contractor is going to bid on and come up with a price. But that's kind of where we're at. And like Kim said, I know prices just continue to go up in construction costs. With the playground area, We are still needing to put the playground border around, and then also the mulching of the entire area. And additionally, the fencing has already been completed, and waiting until they've paved everything there right now at times to work, but waiting for the curbs to be put in after they're done with painting all the parking spots and everything. With the improvements, this is just things that we had in there that we took out just for some of the athletic fields to have things that the kids need to play, including L screens, home plate bases, pitching mounds, for the batting cages in the bullpen. The baseball outfield fence gates allow exterior field access. That has been completed. And I know that the additional irrigation line was put in as well. With the concession stand area, these are just some very basic things that we will put in the concession stand in order for it to operate. And once again, with the dog improvements, some different things, agility, equipment, benches, table, waste management, and watering fountain.
Okay, just on the dog park, some of that number has been reduced because we have had some donations. But we will, I would say that number is probably more around 11,000 right now. I would say.
They figure out, so what are you gonna put in that?
That's one of the things. We talked to our user groups who are mainly right now going to be the New Kent Youth Association to start out with, and we went, there's about $25,000 worth of equipment that's recommended by the architect, but we pared it down to about 14,000 on $12,000 to $14,000 on what they need to get running, and the baseball group as well. Things might happen, like they might coordinate with the Pepsi vendor, and the Pepsi vendor may say, okay, well, I'm going to give you the refrigerator, that kind of thing.
I don't know if that's a rest of the thing, but you know, those people don't do, I think the county really be in charge of that somehow.
Well, we definitely, if we have to
Some
have
type of revenue off of it.
we would. We have a concessionary agreement, and that's actually something that we would do with the baseball group or whichever groups use it, and we're looking at a percentage of their sales. We can do a percentage of their sales, or we can do like a monthly. But when we look at it, we're probably gonna be better off doing the percentage of sales, which is gonna, so in turn, we're gonna have some revenue coming back in. But again, it's like any other project.
How do you know
have
what
to,
the sales are gonna be?
based on what they currently do. You're talking about the baseball groups and the different concession groups. They currently have concession stands that they run, so we know their approximate sales because they're our co-sponsored groups. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
People do their meals there.
Look, I know it's getting that hard to track that cash money.
Yeah. How are you gonna track it?
Well, and that's why the
Yeah, I mean-
suggestion may be to do a monthly use.
I mean, you're not running a tape for you.
They're what?
I think they have some type of machine or something, they have to have some type of.
Yeah, they do.
You're running a
They,
tape for you?
they have they run different programs. I mean, they have an iPad that they
That's my
run.
question, how do you know if you're gonna do a percentage?
Well, as our co-sponsor groups, we can look, one of the parts of the agreement is we can see their books, but I think they're pretty trustworthy groups. And hopefully, and they want the part. They want to do, they want to operate. So, the current president that we're working with is, I think we have a good understanding, with him. Now, private groups come in and want to run it, then that would be probably a different charge. That would be a different charge.
Okay.
Just as our fees, and that's not part of this presentation, but our user fees on the park are obviously lower for our county residents, whereas we already had, one of the football groups, mentioned coming out here, if they used our fields for practice, the Richmond, whatever they are, we would charge them differently than we would our county residents and our co-sponsored groups. But those are different fees that fall under our fee ordinance, which I believe fall into the budget presentation. Is that right, Mr. Hathaway? So if you have questions, we can bring that information to you. But you'll definitely, as mentioned before, there's going to be
As long
some.
as y'all know, I listen.
You're going to have a return on your investment, but it's definitely going to take a while. based on that. So I think, and I really do want to invite you out there. I think if you haven't seen it, you going out there, every week I go out there, it.
But trust me, I was out there Sunday running people off the asphalt. They said, they had a block that they were driving up and down the asphalt on Sunday.
What's that?
On Sunday, I was out there. You had about 60 cars out there.
Driving on the asphalt?
Yeah. So they,
I guess there's big barriers and road closed. Some people just don't pay attention
no,
to
the
them.
barrels on there, they've been up on not to move, so anyway. So,
Well,
yeah.
hopefully people will, we've tried to educate the best we can that the park is not open, and people still choose to not follow that. And I know the sheriff's office is busy and we can't have them sitting out there, but we at some point have to hope that people, we've said, you know, the more you go in and mess up and we have to redo, the longer it's gonna take for us to open. So hopefully that's been communicated some there. I think where you were in the concession, Mr. Evan was asking about equipment in there. The dog park, I think you're on utilities with the Cox Internet, which kind of goes hand in hand with some of the things y'all were talking about this morning.
Yeah, so with the utilities, it was just, you know, we're looking for having Wi-Fi there so that users can be there, or say a student needs to do schoolwork and use the pavilion and just have another outdoor access to that. Additional site improvements, so you suggest things that were needed, had to do a rental for a well, rental for a generator for the well. We ended up putting an aggregate walking trail in, change for mulch. We had some walking trail washout repairs that needed to be done. And then we also built in a 10% contingency in this as well, just in case of unforeseen circumstances. And then we have a couple credits, and then there's also an option 1A about the complete trail system paving and the prices there as well.
And with option 1A, we have put in some preliminary with DCR for some trail access to hopefully push to get that paved. If not, that would come possibly in another phase when we do capital improvement. Right now, we're gonna get out the sprayer and just spray the grass. It's in the weeds, but I think hopefully we'll get states looking at some different funding right now and approved, you know, for improvements to trails and things. So we're really pushing to make this ADA accessible around the whole park, or at least a portion of that. On the bottom, please don't worry, those are just some of my notes that I've had to make just to kind of check where we are. But what we really do want to open this park in July. So and Mr. Hathaway, you can help me if you'd like, but we just really need to know what of these things do you want to support for the remaining opening. Like I said, some of them we have to have. You know, as far as, and we're still looking for donors, we're still looking for sponsors, so hopefully we can bring some money back in. But like right now, on the playground, we have to have mulch. It's a commercial safety thing that we have to do. You know, it may be that the concession building, we know we need about $12,000 for equipment. It may be that we get some of that money back. Somebody might, donate something. Somebody, Sheriff's office gave us our hot dog. Sheriff's shaking his head. We've got a heck of a hot dog machine that was donated to us. So, it's so things like that as we get them back. And if we have if the money funds remain, obviously any of those remaining funds would go back to contingency, and Mr. Hathaway would put those back where they would need to be.
So the request today is for $308,403.87 to be appropriated from capital fund balance in order for us to complete phase 1 and open the park this summer. It's $308. That's including the credits.
I would need to confirm that, Mr. Hathaway, because that has some credits in it. And
$13,000, $322,000, $13,000 credit. So, where are you proposing to pull that money from?
Right now, capital fund balance. Once the budget is adopted and we receive the American Recovery Enforcement Reinvestment Act funding, we may utilize that federal funds to cover this. But we haven't received those dollars yet, so for right now, capital.
Mr. Clark, do you know, we're not pulling much from the debt account right now in interest, correct?
No,
Where it's minimal, right?
There-
Okay.
no, that's not gonna help you very much.
Okay. Might get us, a little bit of mulch, but not much.
You won't buy very much mulch.
Of all my concerns, the mulch ain't one of them. I'm gonna say that.
Please, if you have questions or concerns, or like I said, I know this project has been challenging, frustrating at times. We've definitely shared that with you. But it's our first big part. We've learned a lot of lessons, and I really think, we already have people asking, okay, when are you gonna put the tennis courts? When are you gonna do this? And I'm like, well, it's gonna be a little while, because we're phasing it in, but a lot of the work, I can't tell you the amount of work, that Bruce Howard did with just the grading the site, finding things. And we do know that in the back of your minds, there are still, some questions about some of the design, was some of the design work, or was it just nature itself? And we'll address those things as time avails with that as well. Right now, again, we just want to really get this open for our residents. And I was reading a thing just the other day. It was talking about the need of schools and fire stations, and parks used to be like down in the bottom 10. We've now moved into the top 5 of important amenities in communities. So I thought that was interesting as well, that we're the worth of these things is more than what we give them credit for. So what questions do you have? I know y'all got other.
So do we know the price of the cost, the estimated cost today of phase 2 and 3?
We could do it, we could estimate it, but it's gonna change. Phase 2 has lights for the ball fields in it, and that's close. At one point it was 500,000, but now it's increased to about 650,000.
So I would like to see phase 3 be phase 2.
And, as we move on to that phase 2, we really need to think about that field house facility, what we want that to look like, and what we want in that facility. Of course, that's going to drive the cost.
Right, I know Mr. Stoddard's getting ready to work on some capital buildings and what the needs are for the county, so we can look at, what we need that building to be, if we need that building, and, I think it would be a good location, but we can look at those things as well, because I know there's other properties and different things y'all are working on.
I just want us to look at the next, 4 phases? 3 or 4 phases?
You're talking about more
Phases 2,
the
3, or
basketball
4.
courts and tennis and things like that, and I feel it's kind of like one of those things, once people get in there and see things, I think it'll generate excitement too, and also, we're always chasing after grants and different things, but I will tell you sometimes that it's difficult with our household income for the county. A lot of times we're kind of bumped out with that median. So, people are like, well, your neighboring counties, Charles City, King, Queen get things, but it's different. The household income there is a little bit different, but we're constantly looking. We're still trying to get someone to tackle any of you who want to head up our 501c3. Mr. Evans, like, no, thank you. I've been looking for about 2 years. I'm not allowed to do it as an employee, but if y'all know of anybody, we can actually be fundraising. And I think we have some support from groups as we get in there. I think we'll have our dog enthusiasts do things. I think we'll have our pickleball has become strangely.
Well, I think it was great to saying you got basketball, pickleball. So
Yeah,
I think that's all negotiable. How can we?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and we've tried to educate the community that these things are coming. They're part of the master plan. They're just not right now. And I said some of that will generate the interest. And I have one guy who's really into pickleball right now. He's like, if I can get money for the courts, I'm like, come on, knock yourself out. We can move things up in the phases. But right now, we just wanted to commit to safely opening and successfully opening the first stage, which is the most expensive and the most difficult to construct.
150, I know we keep coming back to the maintenance bill, that's, I don't see how you're gonna bill it for $60 square foot, I don't think that number.
I think that's still low.
We've checked interdepartmentally with some other departments in the county. We've gone to some builders who recently built in the county and things, you know, and I'm like you, I'm like, I can look online and see it, but then they're like, that doesn't include anything, you know, and then by the time you add it up, it ends up being, I mean, we're gonna do, as Jason always says, our due diligence. I mean, we have a procurement path that we have to follow, but we're gonna get it the cheapest but the best that we can. And unfortunately, we are at the point with that number that we probably have to put it out to bid. And that's where Mr. Hathaway mentioned that 300,000. And I really don't want to come back to you again, but if that building comes in significantly higher, or we, you know, I'm not sure what areas we cut out of it. And I know Karen just gave her OSHA safety updates, and there's all kinds of things we have to comply with. And we need to make sure those are in there to protect our staff members and things as well as our community.
I think maybe we should just pull the building off the list for now until we have a real number. Because for us to come in and throw 150 at it now and you come back a month or two later and tell us the bids came back and it's 300, I'd rather deal with that as a line item and have a real number to talk about than kind of a guesstimate. So for you to have a range of 150 to what, 350? I mean, we can be anywhere on that spectrum,
Well,
so.
we got this to be more on the 150.
Yeah, I agree.
We could put it out to bid.
So I think, you know, maybe for today, just to get things moving along, we take the 308 less than 150 and move on that so that the items that need to get done and come back to the maintenance building when we have a real solid number. If that's, you know. And as much as I'd like to do the paving on the trail now, I think it was originally set for phase 2 or 3, I forget which one. I'd almost rather let the ground settle and know where we stand before we put pavement over, you know, we've had some questionable situations with, you know, with the erosion and all that stuff. I'd kind of like to wash that stuff out, no pun intended, before we pave. So I think it might be best.
Well, and hopefully we can get a better idea from the state too, and see if we qualify for any of those funds.
Yeah, I would like to see us pursue something for an 88 grant or something along those
Wouldn't
lines.
we be able to get that,
Yeah, we're just anxiously awaiting to see what state funds are falling down through DC, Department of Conservation and Recreation. And hopefully we can, they've got different projects and we're trying to work with them to just kind of keep, you know, in front of them what we're working on. And like I said, we're going to be working with Mr. Stoddard on some of the capital needs for the county and some of those facilities, and hopefully, you know, keep these at the forefront. But thank you, Ms. Lockwood.
Ms. Lockwood, I think I hear you right. You're proposing $158,403.87.
It sounds like you did the math.
Well, he does.
I would say, I hope you did that math correct.
Well, we've already got kind of hard numbers on the rest of the stuff, and the buildings, yes, so I'd rather wait on that. Yes.
We can cut out some mulching if we have a sponsor.
Why do we keep on talking about the mulch? What about
Because we've got capital landing mulch.
What about the $60,000 dog? What about that?
You know, we're gonna hit up somebody else to help us repaint the well house color we don't like either. And then someone to photograph our park.
Well, I mean, you know, the reality is we're looking at July is right around the corner.
It is.
And, you know, you can't have a playground without the mulch. You can't have a concession stand without the equipment. Otherwise, you just have an empty building, so.
It's actually certified playground chips.
You know more about mulch than I do.
It's a lot of certified playground chips, and we can give you a whole rundown on that if you need it.
You know, in the consent, so you know, like, 5, 6, 5.
They do all kinds.
That's a number there.
We're gonna work with the New King Youth Association on theirs because it is such a fundraiser for them, and we'll take a portion of that. And we can bring, whenever you're ready for that information, usually I come in July to do an update on just Parks and Rec. I can bring all the information in if you'd like.
I have access to points of view.
Okay, let me find out what these all compare. You might want to buy them.
And if we just clean them up, because basically they have some equipment in current concession stands that the football group is staying on here right now.
Nothing to do with that.
Yeah, because there's an outdoor equipment area, but one of the costs, we could have put a hood in there, and that would have been like $40,000, to make it
That's
like a
more
Burger King fix, so everybody can cook that kind of stuff outside.
Would be interesting. I get it.
Okay.
And you don't have something in basic.
Anybody else has any other stuff on any other questions for Attorney?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move that we appropriate $158,403.87 from the capital fund balance to complete phase 1 of the park Lester maintenance building.
Thank you, Mr. Lockwood. Any discussions on board members? Not, Ms. Watkins, poll the members.
Ms. Page,
Aye.
Mr. Steers,
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood,
Aye.
Mr. Tiller,
Aye.
and Mr. Evelyn.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for letting me
you.
sit again.
Next item is proposed amendment to the county code, chapter 66, article 2, subdivision to exemptions from elderly, disabled, and surviving spouses of certain persons still in line of duty. That we doing?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our last meeting, our May regular meeting, I was asked to take a look at our current elderly exemptions for elderly and disabled, and come back to you with a proposal or recommendation on adjustments that we can make that so that it can benefit more people. I've been working with the Commissioner of Revenue on this item, and a couple of things. Right now, Chapter 66, Article 2, Subdivision 2 of the County Code authorizes the Commissioner of Revenue to grant exemptions to elderly that meet a certain income bracket for exemptions on their real estate tax. Basically, those exemptions to qualify, the income qualifications range from $0 to $50,000 in income. And if you fall within that, of income and assets, you can receive up to currently $800 of exemptions in your real estate tax. And the brackets are from 0 to 15,000, it's $800. 15,000 to 25,000, there's a $650 exemption. From 25 to 35,000, there's a $500 exemption. And from 35,000 to 50,000, there's a $350 exemptions. And looking at our current code, I focused on two areas. Number one was the brackets. Are those ranges adequate, and do they need to change? Looked at various other localities, and they were all similar, a little different. And it appears, well, number one, the state code requires us to establish income qualifications for the exemptions. And it appears that what we've done, and what most other localities have done too, is look at the poverty rate for their locality and base those qualifications within on the federally recognized poverty rate, which is 80% of the median income, household income for the locality. And that puts us right around $50,000. Actually, our median income has grown over the years, and if you look at a household of two, we could bump that 50,000 up to 57,000. That's the current 80% threshold right now, but that fluctuates every year. So I think we're good with the 50,000, that we currently use. But we could increase it to open this up to a few more people. The biggest area of concern that I saw that I would recommend be our focus is the amount of the exemptions. We are fairly low compared to what other localities are offering. And working with the Commissioner of Revenue, and she's put together a proposal to increase the amount of the exemptions, which I'll pass out. Columns in green, that's our current policy. As I've mentioned, the exemption amounts is shown there, but if you look in the fourth column, that column shows the number of residents that currently participate in the program where the exemptions cover 100% of their tax bill. And as you can see, that's only 6 residents in the lowest bracket, that's $0 to $15,000 income. Only 6 would receive an exemption in an amount that covers 100% of their tax bill. Currently, there's 164 residents that participate in the program. And I'm sorry, I don't think I've mentioned at the beginning, you have to be at least age 65, or you have to have a permanent total disability to receive this exemption. And the total amount of our exemptions currently is $95,092. What's being proposed is to increase that lowest bracket, the $0 to $15,000 of income and assets, to that $800 exemption for that bracket to $1,600. Increase the second lowest bracket from $650 to $1,300. The third bracket, the $25,000 to $35,000 in income and assets, from $500 to $1,000, and increase the highest bracket to $35,000 to $50,000. From $350 to a $500 exemption. The next column in the blue is the number of people that the exemption amount would cover 100% of their real estate building. You can see from that change, you really significantly bump up that number of people whose bill would be totally covered. There would be an additional cost associated with this, and we estimate that that increase would be $71,054. What I would recommend if we move forward with this is to make this effective, not this upcoming tax year, because the budget is set and you would have to find that $71,054 in your budget to compensate for the loss of revenue that we would see. But to make this effective the following tax year, in fact, I believe it's too late to pass anything that will come into effect for the upcoming tax season, as I believe May 1st is the deadline for the exemption applications to be submitted to the Commissioner of Revenue.
Does that be advertised?
We would have to change the code, so yes, there would be a public hearing. It would not have to go to the Planning Commission. It would go straight to the board.
Anybody have questions? Sorry. So these numbers are just based on current. These aren't based on.
Well, because we're not changing the threshold, we are basing it on the current numbers, and we don't think that that will change too much. Now, it probably will have somewhat of an impact because we're given more of a benefit There may be some residents that qualify, but didn't bother because the amounts were so low, and we may pick up some residents, but no, these numbers are just.
And so what's the purpose in this change?
We were asked to look at it to give a greater benefit
Okay,
to the residents.
thank you.
I've also received questions and complaints, not complaints, but, you know, requests from our residents, because they've talked to other people from other localities and know what their benefits are, and ours are compared to.
With this person line,
Yes,
I guess when we look at it, it'd be good to see that information.
yes.
In front of the little town, what they're doing with that.
Awesome, Mr. Chairman. I requested a possible greater tax exemption on the personal property. You know, the automobiles and stuff like that. And I don't know if the Commissioner Revenue copy on the personal property tax exemption.
Yes, I did, speak with the commissioner regarding that, with the vehicles, by exempting, I believe, one vehicle, for those residents, that meet income qualifications that we would have to set, age 65 and older, or that are permanently disabled. And the commissioner had ran some numbers too. The cost to implement such an exemption, we'd be looking at roughly, I believe the number was about $95,000.
$95,625.
So that's something else that we can bring to you. Commissioner's done work and research on that. I did not look at what other localities are offering in regards to the vehicles, but I can do that research.
Do that along with.
Yeah, I don't, how's everybody else feel about that? So if you, are we talking about exemption? Of course, isn't that already a car?
But you got one for high mileage.
They still do that?
There's various vehicle exemptions now, local and state, but this would be an additional one that you would qualify based on income, age, and having a disability.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have a program in place now, correct? That's what we're saying by this document. So at our last meeting, we looked at proposals for increases for our safety and welfare, saying fire and rescue and sheriff's department, based on other localities. We looked at, we're looking at schools based on other localities. We're looking at all these things based on other localities. What is our revenue versus other localities? When we look at this, are we looking at the whole story? I mean, we're going out and we're looking at what other localities are doing, but what is our revenue to the counties versus the other localities? I see all of this of what they're doing, but I never see what their revenue is. And I think that when we look at this to see the whole story, then we have to look at, that's a part of the story. And finance here, is it me?
Well,
I mean, is that?
for the real estate tax exemption, because that's the only one I've done research on. I did look at similar sized localities, Dinwiddie, King William, Isle of Wight. I looked at some larger ones too, Hanover, Chesterfield, Bonify, Goochland. I really did try to look at and base my recommendation on similar localities of similar size. And I can give you all that background information as well.
Okay. I mean, because I know about 5 people that qualify for this. I mean, I've talked to people around the county that qualify, that complain about their taxes, And then when you ask them, they say, well, I'm not gonna give the county all my personal information. So, you know, we talk about provide, I mean, I'm serious, any given time, you know, I had just, 2 months ago, somebody called me and said, well, do I have to give them all this information? Well, I was expert, you know? So, I mean, we're talking about what we're gonna increase. I think that when we talk about that, we talk about how we're trying to lower utilities, we're trying to, lower taxes, we're trying to, get our staff up to, competitive salaries, how we have a school that we're building, we have another school, we gotta start saving to build. I mean, we have a board, we don't desire increases in taxes, you know, but at the end of the, it's what we move into. You know, it's no secret, I mean, we're not hiding what we do in Kent County. We got it on Facebook and on the website and everything else, you know? And so I just think that we have to be mindful of everything that we increase or decrease, it affects what we can do as an entire county and how it affects every resident and every staff member in this county. That's all I have to say. And I love seniors, so let's put that out there too. But at the end of the day, it becomes a visionary decision about how we're gonna run and operate this county financially and the future needs of the county. And maybe the public is not aware of the total future needs of the county. So, and that's, I said I wasn't saying anything, but that's it.
So, you know, I think, I like this on the car, I mean, we provide services to the residents, a lot of those residents with that car, that's the only thing we're already getting tax money from, probably a lot of them, we got to provide police, fire and rescue, and a lot of those people don't even have real estate in the county, or anything, so. I'd be a little concerned about the first property one. That's just me.
Yeah, when you look at what the price of cars are.
Yeah.
You're talking, I mean, you'd have, if you did consider it, there should, you know, be a cap on the value of the vehicle as well.
We bring it, look at it. I mean,
What, the figures that the commissioner gave me, and I think she copied Rodney on this, the assessed value was around $8,500 for a vehicle. And with the current rate at $375 per 100, that would equate to about $95,625, and that would affect approximately 300 of our senior citizens. That's what I was looking at for the senior citizen. I'm not comparing it to what any other county does.
I'm a senior, I'm 65.
Well, then maybe you could qualify. You know, but I mean, you got senior citizens on fixed income, and they're driving a vehicle that's 12 years old and got 200,000 miles on it, and they're still paying the tax on the vehicle.
Me
And I was
too,
just-
I'm 65 years old, I'm driving a vehicle, 2008, I got 275,000 miles on it.
Well, if you guys don't want to discuss it, that's not with me. I just asked.
I mean, I'm just
Bring it up to-
saying, when we talk about it,
Like I said before, we're always doing stuff for the kids, we're building schools, we're building parks, and they say, what are we doing for our senior citizens? And this is,
absolutely.
people say, let's do stuff for our senior citizens. I thought this would be a great way to reach out to some of our senior citizens and help them out.
Absolutely. And I think that when it comes to somewhere for them to live, absolutely it should be empathy on having your property that you have worked your whole life for. I do agree with that empathy for that. And so what you drive, that's a choice.
Not really.
All right. So this, bring the, package up to that.
Yep.
Secondary 6-year plan.
Yes, thank you. Before you, you have the FY 22-27 secondary 6-year plan. This is an annual plan that we receive allocations from VDOT for to address our secondary road system in Lee County. Those secondary roads, generally roads with a 600 number or higher, are classified as secondary roads. The projected annual allocation for next fiscal year, FY 2022, is $67,422. We all know the cost of road construction, so you know that this really doesn't get you very far. And generally, it takes several years of allocations to accumulate enough money to do one project. And that is the case for what's being proposed for next fiscal year. Through working with VDOT, they are recommending that that money be put towards addressing drainage issues at Route 618, which is Olivet Church Road. The drainage issue is really closer to the Route 60 end of 618. If you've gone through there after a rain, you know, it doesn't take much for the water to go across the road there at that section. So that is the plan that you have before you. This does require a public hearing, which we've advertised for your May regular meeting. But I wanted you to be aware of this plan prior to the public hearing.
All right, thank you.
How does road rate, I mean, the drainage on the road, wouldn't that fall under their maintenance? I mean, that to me is like,
Well,
you
I
know,
don't even know why, since I've been on board, I don't even know why we've had this 60-year plan for that call it. Because,
I mean, you can't do anything with $68,000 anyway, so,
yeah,
you know, it's, but it doesn't make any sense to me why drainage issues on an existing roadway would fall under something that would come out of our budget. It sounds to me like it's a lack of maintenance or I don't know what, but, you know, here we are again, it's like, we have to ask permission for everything we want done, and we have to provide all the funding for it. It makes me wonder, you know, why does VDOT exist other than to deny things we want done?
Well, it's very frustrating. In fact, right before coming over here, I was on the phone with a resident that lives in the Rockahawk campground area, who spoke with VDOT and was told by VDOT that the county has money to pay Rockahawk Road through the Security and Transportation Authority, and that she needed to contact us.
Oh, I want the
And
name.
this is just maintenance. This is that road needs to be repaved. It's regular maintenance. So, I understand the frustration. I share it.
Well, with that frustration, I do want to say that on the maintenance side, the people that do the work are really working to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't fault the guys that are out there trying to get these things done. It's the upper management of VDOT. And quite frankly, it's our General Assembly that does not allocate the funding required to maintain the roadways in Virginia. And they haven't done it for decades, and it's their fault. So think about who you vote for and what their priorities are, because every time you need a front-end alignment, thank you, VDOT. Thank you. Sorry. It's my rant. Can you tell I've been working with VDOT?
Welcome.
Thank you, man.
Are you better
Yeah,
now?
I'm better.
Okay, you
Thank
sure?
Give me some water.
Okay, give me some water. Okay.
all right, next item is light ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway.
Thanks, sir.
You still mad? Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I believe it was last work session, the item came up of spotlight in general. We wanted to touch base, give a little bit of history on what's currently in the code and then potential opportunities to move forward and show improvements or new code in general. To establish the baseline, I just want to go over what's already existing, what we currently enforce related to spotlight, general code compliance, and the like. Chapter 58 currently addresses solid waste, which is in general, garbage, refuse, and then weeds and tall grass. And that's currently enforced through the zoning department. Mr. Vaughn handles those. Chapter 70 addresses traffic and vehicles, your inoperable vehicles. Generally stating you can't have inoperable vehicles, trailers, tractor trailers and the like, for longer than 60 days. That's also enforced through the zoning administrator. And then your chapter 18, community development, which is enforced through the building department or code official, addresses unsafe structures, related to fire hazards, unsanitary or deficient conditions, vacant buildings that need to be boarded up, things along those lines. With that being said, there are some opportunities we can amend those ordinances to strengthen them a little, or look at entirely new, whether it's a nuisance ordinance or a spotlight. I really wanted to get the discussion going today and kind of see where the board was looking to go with that, and get some feedback before we prepare an ordinance or amendments to bring for review. Kind of open the discussion at this point and see what areas, what topics we wanted to look at, whether it's buildings, whether it's trash, whether it's weeds.
You want addresses?
I mean, I guess what sort of topics is the board wanting to look to improve upon? Is this?
Could I interrupt you a second?
Yeah.
Before we go into the
Uh-huh.
new orders, going back to like community development,
Mhm.
all the building structures are considered unsafe. Okay, we send a notice. What happens after 30 days? We send another notice, and then after that, what do we do? What have we been doing in the past? Nothing, right?
As far as structures go, do you want to answer process on that, Brian?
So it is a vicious cycle, that's all I can say. It's a vicious cycle of notices.
Right.
Where it gets us to an end game of the actual removal of a structure, is difficult. If that property owner does not have the means to do that,
It stops.
it stops. Correct, because we don't have the means to do that either. Or we don't have a policy in place to remove that structure.
You mean money?
Sure. That's a great way.
So going forward, to remedy that problem, what would we do?
Well, I mean, we'd have to look at, resources in general, whether it's additional staffing or money to fund these sort of programs, how we want to structure it. But before we can do that, we really need to identify what areas the board would like to look at, and then draft a plan to remedy those sort of situations.
So is it a situation where if the property owner does not remedy the situation, we hire an outside contractor to go in and do the work?
That's certainly possible. Then.
And then, of course, where's the funding gonna come for the?
Right.
And I know that, but it was mentioned also that we could possibly file a lien against that property. And in the event they sell the property, then we eventually would recoup our money.
Yeah, in certain cases, state code allows for a lien. If we go in, whether it's county employees or it's agents go and perform the work, we can bill that back to the property owner if it's not paid.
Right now, we don't have that in the code, right?
In some sections it is. I know it's in there for traffic, like inoperable vehicles and weeds and solid waste, I believe. But I'm not sure if it's in the community development chapter. Brian, do you know, man? It is?
I don't know, it is in the state code.
Yeah, it's in the state code, yeah.
It gives us that ability, through Brennan to go ahead and create that lien against the property, yes.
But we would need it in the county code before we do that, right?
In the county code.
It is in there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I thought you just said it stopped.
Process, though. I'm looking at the county code.
chapter 18, currently there is a provision in there, if you have to remove a unsafe structure, and you hire an outside contractor to do that, the costs of that are chargeable to the owner and can't constitute a lien on the property.
I kind of agree with this too. It looks like we need to figure out what we can do with our existing
Yeah,
ordinance, and because we're not enforcing it now, I mean, at the end of the day, it all comes back to money. And, I know we've been working on a couple projects. I mean, ever since I've been on the board, we've been taking forward, and nothing's ever happened. I think Congress will forward, but.
Yes.
I mean,
And that's specifically, I'm talking about the unsafe structure part.
so I guess for Mr. Steer, are we talking about businesses or just structures?
I'm talking about.
There, it's uniform, yeah, they're not
Okay.
residential,
Yeah.
commercial, it's structures in general. Yeah.
But I didn't know that in the current code, the county had the authority to go in, hire an outside contractor to come in, demolish the building, haul it to the dump or whatever, and then put a lien against the property. I didn't know we had that.
I know we do.
There's a couple stages in between if we get to the demolish, the notices, give the landowner an opportunity to secure the structure, whether it's
Right.
fencing, boarding up, windows, doors, things of the like. Since I've been here, I don't think we've gone to a demolition. I'm not sure about it
I've never
previously.
noticed it either. I didn't think we would. But you said we can't.
To follow through the court system, it would take it all the way through the court system to get to the point where we would send someone in to demolish the structure and then potentially create a lien against the property.
Right. But the judge is not going to rule for that unless we have it in our county code, right? Yeah, I mean, I didn't know, I didn't know.
We just haven't enforced it yet.
But it's, good.
But when you start doing that, who's over this, we get, someone's gonna start ringing.
Well, mine are ordering, I'm not
Just one vote? Got two votes.
And generally, if there's an unsafe structure, the building official goes and looks at it and determines, one, whether there's an imminent threat and then danger of collapse, which would prompt the building official, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's an imminent situation where there's collapse to hurt somebody at any moment in time, then he'll tag the building and we can demolish it to take what steps are necessary. That's unusual that there's an imminent.
Well, I can give you an example. In my district, there is a house that has, the front yard is turned into a junkyard, and you have refrigerators in the front yard, right up next to the road. And a child can get inside one of those refrigerators and get trapped, and then we have some serious problems with it.
Yes, but that would be different than enforcing it through an unsafe structure. What I'm talking about is a building or some other thing that collapse. But yes, that's.
That would be an imminent threat to me, I think.
Well, that falls under the solid waste issue.
Yeah.
Ordinance, I mean, if you're talking about trash in the yard.
I mean, that's where you get into the trash junk and, like Mr. Hefty said, we had a previous discussion, one man's trash is another man's treasure. It's very subjective, and I think Mr. Vaughn can attest to that on what is,
You can usually tell.
is trash a child's toy in the front yard that's lost the wheel, or is it refrigerators out there? Where that line comes and how we stand as a county as far as enforcement goes.
It would burn is trash.
You're not gonna start a fire.
Are you?
I agree with some pictures.
So I guess is the direction I'm hearing, we want to look at our current ordinance and see if it needs to be improved to carry out the intent and bring back any suggestion or suggested recommendations or.
Well, that's kind of what you're doing here anyway, isn't it? I mean, you've got suggested language change. So.
Yeah, but we're looking at a possible nuisance ordinance as well, which will be entirely new to the code. But we have identified some areas where we could make some minor tweaks to the existing. Is that an avenue we want to start with?
What's the nuisance? Just a neighbor you don't like?
Yeah, there's a state definition of it. You know, it really comes back to anything that, you know, a nuisance which is common to the public and which may injure the citizens generally who may be so circumstanced as to come with this influence. So really, you know, you start looking at conditions for, you know, harborages of that harbor mice, rats, snakes, things like that. You know, unsanitary disposal of trash, which ties back into the solid waste ordinance we have. Buildings and structures, you know, hazards, you know, open wells, pits, discarded refrigerators with doors attached.
Right.
Things along those lines. Yeah.
Well,
You're
honestly,
gonna be going,
go ahead.
you're gonna be having to take before Mr. Patrick, what's your opinion?
You know, I think you do have tools in your code right now to address some of these issues. The state code does give you the authority to enact an ordinance specifically prohibiting public nuisances, which would, you know, endanger the health and safety. The distinction between a private nuisance and a public nuisance generally being a neighbor can impact his neighbor's property and create a nuisance for that neighbor. That's not something that the county would get involved with. That would be a private right of action that the two neighbors would have to sort out. But if they're creating something, usually it's like a hazardous waste or something, some sort of waste or some sort of issue on the property, which is a health issue general to the community or the public or to the county, then that's something you could add as a mechanism to enforce. You'd have to charge somebody in the county with enforcing it, and you'd have to set up the funding for the enforcement and the funding to deal with that, which is the policy decision. But if I guess my question would be to you guys, what's
the common sense?
I
don't want the lawyer answer.
The lawyer and my common sense question is, what is it in particular that you, sort of getting what Justin's asking, I guess, what is it that's bothering you or that people are complaining about that you want to fix? And if there's an example of a public nuisance that our current ordinance won't address, then maybe I would recommend you adopt that. If we haven't taken a court, then we do that, that's fine, but in the end. But if you're just thinking about things in general and don't have any specific problems you're dealing with, then you've got a way to, once you put it on the books, then you've got to sort of.
I'm just wondering, you know, based on the current ordinances we have, and if we enact this new one, what are we going to accomplish that we can't already do now? So, you know, if we already have issues with solid waste and abandoned vehicles and unsafe homes, structures and all that stuff, what are we going to accomplish with a new ordinance that we can't do now if it's just a lack of either enforcement or follow through or the ability to get out there and find these things? I mean,
I don't want to say it broadens the area, but it gives us another avenue to pursue select issues that may not fall nice and neatly with already established ordinance.
because I think what brought it up was Mr. Steers talking about this house in his neighborhood, and it sounds, in an undisclosed neighborhood. In his district, excuse me. So it sounds to me like we already have the means to resolve that issue with the current ordinances. It's a matter of getting it, I'm asking as well as stating.
No,
So
I think so, Mr. Lockwood. One of the things that we can do if the board is so inclined is I'd be happy to meet with the staff and discuss the particular issues that they have, whether we have a process or an avenue through our court ordinance to deal with that. And if we don't, can we amend our current one, or do we need to add a new one? And we can bring that back to you with our findings based on the specific goals
Yeah,
and issues.
I think
And
that would be
that's
good.
how we should tie it personally.
Because I think part of our problem too is just having the ability to get out there and let people know that they're kind of breaking the law here. Because I mean, when you just look at the inoperative vehicle aspect of it, I can think of 100 places without even trying that, you know, I know there are cars in the woods and cars in the driveway, I mean, not just one or two sometimes. So, you know, I know we get out there when somebody complains about it, but I can think of some neighborhoods that, you know, you would almost have to have half the cars that are there hauled away if that's the case. So, I mean, I think
That's where health resource comes in, you know,
Yeah.
are we complaint based still, or are we moving towards more of a, not patrolling, but, you know, actively pursuing these issues? And rather than waiting for them to come to us.
And I'm wondering how many people know that, you know, you can't have a car that's inoperative in your driveway. That, I mean, my nephew is a car project guy. He's always got something that, you know, is inoperative that it will be one day, at least in his mind. So, you know, I wonder how many people actually know that they're breaking the law in that sense. So maybe part of it is just an awareness campaign to let people know that, you know.
Well, in this particular house, that's not in my neighborhood. I had a letter typed up on letterhead, county letterhead, and I had it sent to him, telling him he had 60 days to clean it up. And believe it or not, the refrigerators are gone now. So hopefully he's cleaning up the property. I didn't get your permission, but I hope that's okay.
You sign my name on it.
No, I did not.
Mr. Michael, you got something?
Well, and it goes back to the means, and yes, we have the means legally to require this. What we don't have the means to is, one, enforce it with staff, or two, I'm assuming monetarily to take care of it if it's not done by the property owner.
That's the two things, you gotta have staff and you gotta have money.
And
So we got neither. Enough staff or enough money.
Mr. Bond wants to speak.
Go ahead, Mr. Bond. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've been here over 20 years, and I think like 15 years ago, the board wanted me to go out and the board wanted me to do these things. And I took them to court, and after I took them to court, and they didn't do anything, the judge was saying, county, you clean it up. So I billed paying for $30,000 for one cleanup, and the board told me, that's okay. So what I'm saying is, all those cars and everything you have, people will do something if they know you're gonna do something. But if you come to a point and say, hey, this is getting too expensive, we can't do this anymore. You're gonna make me uneffective. Speaking of something scary.
Comes back to money. I know we looked at blight orders. How long ago? That's probably been like 15 years ago, didn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Like, that was other part of county. All right, so that's the direction.
Yeah, I would get with staff, and we'll come back to you with the direction.
Maybe take some of this new stuff and encompass it into this, what we already have.
Well, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Why don't you, Ms. Scott, why don't you go ahead and have staff go ahead and take some of these abandoned buildings you think would qualify around the county?
I think it's some pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of, you know, we kind of what we could do with it, what we take.
Are there any grants to help people clean up stuff like that? I mean, is that usually a local thing?
I already get discounts on their real estate taxes.
Now, you know, for larger sites, there's some like brownfield grants. But for the smaller residential, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, we deal with it sometimes with, for example, do you go through the EDA to help somebody who's been in violation clean up their property? And on the one hand, spending money helps clean up the property. On the other hand, there's sort of a fairness aspect of, well, you're kind of rewarding this person who just ignored you and is responsible for the problem. And so you can set up your own sort of internal grant with public money to help get that funded, but you run into the sort of fairness problem in a lot of those situations. And unless it's a big sort of brownfield site like Mr. Hathaway mentioned, there's probably not direct state grant money to help out.
Well, I asked because there's a young man in our area that is doing a crowdfunding thing to help clean up an elderly resident's property. And, you know, he's getting volunteers and doing it because they literally don't have the means either financially or physically to clean up their property. So, you know, they're at risk of losing that property if they don't get it done. So, it just would.
Yeah, the grants I found, just anecdotally, I think can work in that situation. It's not sort of a person who has a disability or elderly and not really can't do it. It's not their fault. The other area where it can work is, you know, for example, a facade improvement program that can go through the EDA where you have businesses that they're not bad enough that they are violating anything. They don't look great, and you want to help them improve the sort of corridor or that area. And you'll say, look, we'll give you $4,000 if you replace this old, not so great looking sign. And you do that, you know, uniformly, and that can be a good program too.
Yeah. Another thing I learned in this process, I don't know if you know it or not, but if it tends to be a fire hazard, you know, I thought we could get the fire marshal to go out there and write them up or, you know, condemn the property, whatever. The fire marshal has no jurisdiction over residential, only commercial. I didn't know if you guys knew that.
Wow.
So, you know, a couple places, it's a fire hazard with all the lumber, dried lumber in the front yard and stuff like that. If it caught fire, it burned 3 or 4 houses down. The fire marshal can't help you out.
All right, any other business?
I just would like to mention that next week, weather permitting, Farmers Drive is going to be closed at least one lane at a time, alternating pretty much all of next week, 7 to 4, I believe. So if you're traveling down that road on a regular basis, especially if you're traveling through, it literally takes 1 minute longer to go down 33 to 30 if you're connecting to Barhamsville. So even on a regular day, it's not such a time saver, but it will definitely save you time next week with VDOT working, cleaning out the ditches. And it's kind of funny, they can do it on Farmers Drive. But anyway, that's going to be occurring all next week, weather permitting. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
And also, farmers market is open up, just a president.
Yes, May 15th, Saturday, May 15th will be the opening day of the farmers market. They'll be going on through the summer, every Saturday from 8 to 11:30. And we changed the location this year. We're back at our original site at the pavilion at the corner of Newton Highway and Route 106. And one more comment too. Next week, there are going to be days during next week where certain departments will be closed. And that's why we relocate some of our offices in the administration building. We are nearing the completion of the first phase of our HVAC project, where the offices on the first floor will be moving back next week. And the offices on the second floor will be moving out of the administration building. So we'll post notices on our social media, but there will be some days when some of our offices are closed.
And our vaccine clinics are Winding down.
Vaccine clinics are winding down. We are transitioning now to second doses, and we'll be administering second doses through May 21st.
Mr. Evans,
Yes, sir.
just a reminder that the Sports Backers Marathon will be running this Saturday. Thank you, Dion. We will be managing roads in the Tunstall end of the county pretty much for runners. They say they should be finished by 10. I'll have staff out till about noon, just in case, but they'll be longer if we need to, but just a reminder to the citizens.
Can I get one staff with me?
I'll be with you.
That's all we're on with those. All right, thanks, Sheriff.
Did you want to say anything about
Well, oh yeah, this afternoon we're holding our employee appreciation lunch. I'm not gonna be able to be there. I have some other stuff going on, but I would like to thank all the employees for their hard work, dedication over the past year. And hopefully some of the other board members will be there. I'm sorry, I missed that. I always enjoy that. All right, with that being said,
Move to adjourn.
so go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Steers? Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Ms. Page?
Aye.
And Mr. Evelyn?
Adjourned. Yeah. There you go. I'll head up there.
Hot dog, burger.
Hopefully we'll know
Well, we got to do our proper job, didn't
Okay, there's a big difference between, yes, I appreciate
we?
that.
Got them to do that.
I just would like to know the difference